That's impact. That's impact. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Let's Get It Right with me, your host, Wright. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Wright Leader. Hashtag That's Impact. We have a special guest that is here with us. And you all know that on the last video, the most recent video that is up on my Twitter page, we had the privilege, honor, and pleasure to have the so awesome Alicia Ray with us. So, with that being said, the response was overwhelming. Because the response was overwhelming, I have asked Alicia if she would come back and share her greatness with us for part 2. So, with that being said, here she is, the so awesome, the so fabulous Alicia Ray. Alicia, go ahead and introduce yourself. For those that maybe they didn't catch episode 1, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to the viewers and to the audience.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back on. I'm so excited to join you for part 2. I'm Alicia Ray. I am an educator in North Carolina. I have been in a middle school media center for the past 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was in a pre-K 5 media center. And before that, I was a 5th grade math and science teacher and then went self-contained. So I've had the gamut from pre-K up to 8th graders.
Right. And so obviously, as we get ready to get into this episode, you are well versed at having seen a lot of different educational situations from a lot of different angles. And you've analyzed a lot of different things as you've been put in those roles. And I mentioned the word analyze, right? Which really takes me into the first thing that I want us to go ahead and share with the viewers. And that is, when we were having a discussion, we're really looking at what we could go ahead and share with the viewers for part 2 that would really be impactful. You mentioned something to me about data and how data impacted students. So you told me, Alicia, that here's what you had. You had students coming into the library. You had students that maybe before were emerging readers, reluctant readers. We had talked a little bit a second ago about data and how data impacts students. And you had some data from before that had told you that, obviously, kind of as we talked about in episode 1, and if you haven't watched episode 1, go back and watch that, folks. It's a real treat. But you had this data that we talked about in episode 1 that kind of told you that, hey, we need to make a change. We need to do something different, right? Mm-hmm. So you had these emerging readers and reluctant readers that were coming into the media center, but let's just say it this way. Their previous experiences in the media center in the past, in years past, were not as positive as we would like for them to have been. So, and I know that you shared this with me offline, and I want you to go ahead and share it with our viewers. You had a certain way or certain strategy, or we call it in the business of education, you had a hook to get them into being engaged with the reading. The last time on the last video, we talked about, them coming in and picking the books and everything, but I wanted us to get a little bit deeper in episode 2 about how did you do that? Like, talk to us about the actual technique. How did it play out? What did that look like? Share that with us.
Yeah, so when the kids would come to the media center, they would, prior to being with me, they would be restricted within a certain Lexile level. And so when they came to me, I would tell them to pick any book off the shelf. And they would just kind of look at me and are you serious? Absolutely. Go pick anything. It blew their mind that they were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that were allowed to go check out a picture book or a graphic novel They could go get a biography on their favorite soccer player. They were allowed to go get anything they wanted. So they had an entire media center full of books, and they could pick anything.
Literally walk into your media center and pick any book at all. Is that what you're saying? Just to make sure our readers, I say our readers, our viewers, to make sure that they understand they could pick any book at all. Are you telling me that that's what really happened?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't care what the kids read as long as they're reading. Seeing them dive into a book is what I want. And if they're not getting things that they're interested in, they're not going to read anyway. It doesn't matter how many books leave the media center. So I would much rather have a student take a book that I know that they're going to read because they're interested in it, rather than to take a book that they're not really that excited about. They're just taking one so they can basically check a box. So Miss Ray will get off their back for not checking out a book from the media center, because they know that one does not simply leave the media center without a book. So they'll take the book, and I know when they leave that they're going to read it because it's something they're into. They want to read that book.
So, and we kind of talked about this. This is kind of the way that I saw it, and correct me if I'm wrong here. The pick any book approach was really a way to bring them into being more engaged, or the way I would say it, sometimes I say things in maybe unconventional ways, is the pick any book was the hook.
Yes, definitely. Pick any book was
that's
definitely
what brought them in, right?
Yeah.
The pick any book was the hook. And you were telling me that there was a particular student that really had experienced a lot of disciplinary trouble at the school and had not been the most voracious of readers. And he became engaged in this process. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So he came in and he just had this very tough exterior, and he didn't want anybody to know that he had any vulnerabilities at all. And so one of the first times that we were chatting, he was telling me about a graphic novel. So I said, "Oh, babe, we've got a ton of graphic novels. Come on over." So we went and picked out a couple, and he was asking me, "What about this? What about this?" And he's just one of those kids that you just don't expect him to want to read. And he comes in, picks a graphic novel. And what was amazing was he's actually a student that we have a set of graphic novels, and we were missing book number 4. It was already checked out by somebody else. So he had read books 1, 2, and 3. Book 4 we didn't have in the media center at the time. He was a little, taken back by that. I said, "Oh, but we have that in a fiction version, like a novel, and it's chapters. It's not technically a graphic novel like you're used to, but if you want to go and find out what's happening in the book, you're welcome to go take book 4 in the novel form, and then come back to graphic novels in book 5 if you'd like." He was like, "Yeah, give me that book." And he's actually one of my, on my list of top circulating students. He's within the top 5. And if you met him, you would never know. And he's just an awesome kid. Anytime he comes in, he wants to grab a book. He wants to switch them out. And I love that about him.
Wow. So what he was doing was, probably without him really even knowing it, is he was living out one of the things that we talk a lot about in education, a few things actually. One, we talk about student voice and student choice. We also talk about student agency and students advocating for their learning. I guess I would kind of really even say, to add to those things, once he got in and he started reading, again, someone that by all accounts was an emerging reader or a reluctant reader, he experienced his first taste of success with reading. Is that right?
He sure did. He absolutely did. And then once he had that first small taste of success, it kind of changed the way he felt about himself. And he knows that when he walks into the media center, he's seen as a completely different student. He still tends to get in a little bit of trouble, but when he walks in that media center, he holds his head high and he'll grin at me real big. And he's very proud of himself, and I'm so incredibly proud of him. And he is it's really cool to watch him progress and who he is based on this small piece of success that he's been able to have.
So here we have a student that has encountered some problems, has had some challenges discipline-wise, and through the power of books, you have started to change his identity from the inside out. Wow, that is powerful. I hope that you all out there got that. A young man's identity changed from being someone that was seen as having challenges with behavior and challenges with discipline, and through the power of books and experiencing that taste of success with books, his identity has changed, and I'm sure is probably continuing to change as he reads more books. One of the things I wanted to do, and we have about 5 or 6 minutes left with this episode. I wish that we had more time, but about 5 or 6 minutes left with this episode. I want you to speak to, because you did share with me about the Q2 or second quarter data and how it was different from the quarter one data, and how the data was arranged and what it represented, and outliers, and all of that. Share with us about that.
Yeah, so when the kids were setting their first quarter goals, they really weren't sure what a goal would even look like for themselves. So I noticed that they were gravitating towards just benchmark numbers. They were saying, "Oh, I'll read 5 books or 10 books or 15 books." It was really interesting to watch them say, "Oh, 10." And so then they realized, well, maybe 10 wasn't so realistic for them and their lifestyle, as involved in other things as they are. They didn't have the time to read 10 books. And so as they went and made their second quarter goals, I noticed that the data was getting tighter, and that the students went back and they said, okay, I'll just read, 1 book, 2 books, 3 books, but it was much tighter. We just set our third quarter reading goals, and I've noticed that the data is even tighter, but now the numbers are going up. So the kids are saying, rather than I'll just read 1 book, those kids who experience success are now saying I'll read 2 or 3 books. So we have a section now of 3, 4, 5, 6 books is what they're wanting to read within a 9-week period, which, coming from a group of students who 2 years ago, they checked out 400 books in the media center total all year. I am beyond thrilled with 4, 5, 6 books in 1 quarter.
Wow, that is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things that we talked about before as well, that really is implicit within that, but it's very significant, right? Is this: as those data sets became more accurate representations and they became more closely aligned between what the students projected, what they thought they would be able to go ahead and meet as their goals, and what they actually did, their actual performance, as those two things became closer, those students actually lived out increased skill sets with what we would call in education SMART goals, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They are. And it's interesting because I'm starting to see it carry over into other places as well. They'll start to create their own goals for other things. The young man that we were speaking of earlier today, I was just talking to him and I said, you've got the rest of the day. Let's go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's see if we can make it for 3 days, 4 days without any trouble. I know you can do this. And he's like, yeah, I can do this. And so he's starting to set goals for himself in other ways. And I know the other students are as well. So that's really powerful. Setting goals that's a life skill, whether we're reading or not. Setting goals for yourself that's the way we make change in our own lives. So it's really cool to see my students do that.
That is awesome. And all from pick a book is the hook, right? And getting
Yes.
them involved in that. And so that's really, really awesome, because what it really points out to us is, before someone can do something really great in their life, whether it's a student or whether it's an adult, engagement is the key. They must be engaged. And so if you're wanting to do something and you're watching this video right now and you're saying to yourself, I want to do something great, understand that engagement is the key. For folks that have watched episodes 1 and 2, what would be your final words of guidance, advice, wisdom, insight for them? Tell us about that. Share that with us.
So as far as literacy goes, allowing the students to choose their own books has really allowed me to build relationships with my students. It allows me to see what they're into. It helps me to understand more about their life choices, and it gives them the opportunity to discover their own passions. So when you open up an entire room and say anything in here can be yours, they appreciate that. And I've noticed that it's taken the fear out of reading for them, and that they are much more confident in themselves as readers. As far as goal setting goes, that is, like we just said, it's a huge life skill. And in order to set realistic, actionable goals for themselves, that's something that you can't teach that in a classroom setting. It's not something that you sit down and you say, this is a tested subject area. It's not tested on an end of grade test or a final exam. Setting goals is something that's tested in life. And so these kids are going to be able to excel not just on a reading final exam because they're more voracious readers, but now they're going to be able to excel at life because they can set goals for themselves and achieve them. So I'm really proud of my kids, and I told them that I'd give them a shout out. So if they're watching, hey kids, I love you and I'm proud of you.
That is absolutely phenomenal. So here you are, you started with this project to increase circulation, and you throughout the process have changed identities that maybe were not the most positive in students into ones that are really positive, encouraging them and fostering and cultivating this environment of leaders, and as well helping them to go ahead and live out, not just develop, but to live out intrinsic motivation, true intrinsic motivation. So I just want to say to the students as well, I'm giving you a shout out also, and you guys are phenomenal, and you guys are awesome, and we're just so very, very, very proud of the work that you all are doing, and we look forward to more success stories in the future. So there you have it. Have Books, Have Goals, Part 2. Until next time, remember, feed your brain, feed your soul, and absolutely grow your role. That's impact the right way. See you next time. That's impact.